Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Okay, let's unpack this. You've brought us some really thought-provoking material today. It's centered around this idea that maybe, just maybe, we've been looking at success and, I guess, human value through a pretty narrow lens.
Oh, that's right.
So we're diving into insights from a highly regarded book that takes a really deep look at introversion and extroversion. And it challenges some pretty deeply ingrained assumptions we have about what makes people tick, and what makes them thrive.
It's a fascinating premise, really, because our society, particularly here in the West, often feels like it's, engineered for just one kind of personality.
Yeah.
The loud one, the assertive one, the person who's always visible. But the source material right off the bat gives us examples that just don't fit that mold.
Right, from the jump, yeah. It makes you question that whole idea. Like, think about someone like Rosa Parks. The source points out that when she passed away, her obituaries, the eulogies, they described her as soft-spoken, sweet, small in stature.
Gentle words.
Exactly. But then right alongside those, you get phrases like the courage of a lion and quiet fortitude. So how do you square that? How do you reconcile being maybe timid and shy, which were terms sometimes used about her earlier life, with the immense courage it took to do what she did?
That paradox is right at the heart of it.
Yeah, the source puts this right front and center. It suggests that, making a monumental impact doesn't always require having the loudest voice in the room.
And that's really the core of what we want to explore today. This deep dive, it's designed to go beyond just the simple definitions. Introvert means you like quiet nights. Extrovert means you like parties. It's deeper than that.
Much deeper.
It's about understanding them as fundamental differences in how we respond to the world around us. And crucially, where we draw our energy from.
Yeah, and we're going to confront what the source material actually calls the extrovert ideal.
Yes.
Which is this pervasive cultural belief, especially strong in the West, that the ideal person is gregarious, charismatic, a natural salesman, totally comfortable and confident in any group. The person who's always on.
Right. And then, in stark contrast, we'll dig into the really powerful, well-supported argument the source makes for the strengths of introverts, strengths that are often underestimated.
Definitely.
We're talking about the quieter individuals, the ones who process things deeply, observe really carefully, and contribute in ways that are just as vital, maybe even more so in certain situations.
And the material you've brought, it comes from this book that's received a lot of praise. Looking at the reviews, people call it informative, well-researched. It's lauded for exploring the power of quietness and effectively dispelling the myth, as one reviewer put it, that you have to be extroverted to be happy and successful. Others noted its wisdom of introspection, called it engaging, beautifully written, even brilliant and profound. It sounds like it really struck a chord.
It seems to offer a kind of path to homecoming for people who felt maybe their quieter nature was something that needed fixing.
Which just speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the pressure that this extrovert ideal puts on people.
It's a powerful cultural force, absolutely.
Absolutely. So our mission today, let's be clear, we're taking a deep dive into this material. We want to distill the most important ideas, understand what introversion and extroversion truly are. We want to explore how society came to, lift up certain personality traits over others. And crucially, why recognizing, understanding, and really valuing the whole spectrum of human personality is essential, not just for us as individuals, but for a healthy society.
Yeah, this goes way beyond just sticking labels on people. It's about appreciating that different people have fundamentally different ways of engaging with the world, different ways of processing information, thinking creatively, leading, and these ways are equally valid.
And throughout this deep dive, we're going to keep connecting these insights back to you, the listener. What does this mean for your work life, your relationships, how you parent, maybe? Or even just how you navigate your day-to-day life and how you see yourself.
We've got some really fascinating ground to cover.
We do. Starting with a look back at history specifically, this major shift in societal values that the source says really paved the way for this extrovert ideal.
And then we'll get into the science. We'll dive into the biological differences that research suggests might underpin these temperaments. We're talking neuroscience, genetics, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. And we'll look at how these differences actually play out in the real world. schools, workplaces, creative fields, social situations.
And we'll explore this idea of free trait theory, that we can all, regardless of our natural tendencies, learn to operate effectively. But also why we need these things called restorative niches.
Restorative niches. Okay, intriguing.
It's going to be a journey balancing the big picture with really specific, compelling examples and research findings, all drawn straight from the source material. So, yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so history first. Where does the source material say this whole shift towards valuing extroversion really began?
Well, the book argues pretty convincingly that a huge transformation happened in Western culture, sort of around the turn of the 20th century. It moved from what it calls a culture of character to a culture of personality.
Okay.
And it wasn't like flipping a switch overnight. It was a gradual thing, driven by big changes in the economy and society.
A culture of character. What does that mean exactly? What did that look like?
Okay, so picture the 19th century. The advice literature back then, self-help books, magazine articles, it was all focused on inner virtues.
Right.
The material describes how people were really encouraged to cultivate qualities like citizenship, duty, hard work, integrity, moral strength. Reputation was built on ethical conduct.
So substance over style, essentially.
Pretty much. The role models weren't necessarily charismatic performers. They were figures respected for their solid moral core, their quiet dignity. Think Abraham Lincoln. He was held up as an ideal, but not for being some flashy speaker. It was about his modesty, his principles, and being reserved, quiet. That was often seen as a sign of good breeding, maybe even depth. It wasn't something that needed fixing. Shyness wasn't the kind of social anxiety we talk about today. Reserve was actually valued.
So it was about who you were deep down, your ethics, your work ethic. That feels fundamentally different from today's focus on, presentation.
It really was. But then things started changing dramatically. Around the early 1900s, you get the rise of big business, mass production, national brands appearing, huge department stores.
Industrial revolution kicking into high gear.
Exactly. And people were moving, leaving farms and small towns, flocking to these booming cities. Suddenly, you had to stand out in a crowd. You had to interact with strangers all the time. And companies didn't just need people to make things. They needed people to sell things, to market them.
Ah, the salesman emerges.
Precisely. The source describes this new era as needing a different kind of person. The salesman, or the social operator.
Yeah.
Someone who was comfortable in the spotlight, good at small talk, had that, ready smile, a masterful handshake.
Yeah.
Someone who could get along with colleagues, but also, crucially, outshine them.
And this is where Dale Carnegie fits in, right? The source mentions him specifically. He sounds like a pivotal figure.
Absolutely pivotal. Dale Carnegie is presented as someone who really saw this shift happening and capitalized on it. He'd been a salesman himself, and he realized that business people needed new tools to succeed in this new world.
Okay.
It wasn't enough anymore just to be honest and hardworking. You had to be good with people, engaging, persuasive. His first book, back in 1913, had a very telling title, Public Speaking and Influencing Men in Business.
Right there in the title.
Yeah. He explicitly argued that speaking confidently in public wasn't just for lawyers or preachers anymore. It was now an indispensable weapon for anyone wanting to get ahead in the keen competition of business.
So the focus shifts from inner virtue to outer performance, from character
to personality. Exactly. And you see it reflected in the popular advice literature of the time. It changed dramatically. Instead of praising integrity and duty, the buzzwords became things like magnetic, fascinating, stunning, attractive, glowing, dominant, forceful, energetic.
Wow, very different vocabulary.
Totally. And the source makes a key point. These personality traits were often presented as things you just had or didn't have, innate qualities, which makes them feel much harder to develop than, say, practicing honesty or working diligently.
Like you're either born with it or you're not.
Kind of. And this ideal was reinforced by the rise of movie stars in the 20s and 30s, seen as these paragons of personal magnetism. Advertising changed too, selling not just products but lifestyles and the personalities associated with them.
And this culture of personality, it didn't just stay confined to the business world, did it? It started creeping into other areas, like how kids were raised.
Oh, absolutely. The source points out that by the 1920s, child guidance experts were actively pushing parents to develop winning personalities in their children.
Winning personalities.
Yeah. They started identifying kids with maladjusted personalities, and they especially flagged shy children. Parents were warned this shyness could lead to serious problems later on.
So shyness became a problem to be solved.
Exactly. And the education system started changing too. The focus began shifting away from just pure academics, book learning, towards, quote, assisting and guiding the developing personality of the student. By 1950, the big slogan for a major White House conference on children and youth was a healthy personality for every child.
That's a really profound shift in what parenting and education were aiming for. From fostering inner virtue to cultivating an outgoing personality, it sounds like the very definition of a successful person was changing.
It was, and this new definition seeped into institutions everywhere. The source mentions how, in the late 1940s, Harvard's provost explicitly said they should favor applicants who were the healthy extrovert kind.
Wow.
Yeah, contrasting them with the sensitive neurotic type. Yale's president, around the same time, said he wanted a well-rounded man, not necessarily a brilliant introvert, even if the introvert might be academically superior.
So being brilliant but quiet was less desirable than being well-rounded and outgoing.
That was the message. Corporate recruiters actively looked for gregarious, active types. The assumption was they'd just be more successful in the workplace.
So being quiet, introspective, maybe even a bit shy, it went from possibly being seen as a sign of depth or sensitivity to being framed as a potential liability, something you needed to overcome or fix.
Precisely. And you still see echoes of this in so many modern workplaces, right? The source describes environments, even prestigious ones, where mandatory participation, endless team projects, constant social interaction, that's the norm.
The open office plan.
It's exactly. Open offices, while maybe intended to foster collaboration, are very much products of this ideal. They often force people to work really hard at appearing extroverted, even if it drains them. People skills can sometimes trump deep expertise or the ability to just focus intensely.
The example in the book about attending that Tony Robbins event, that really drives it home, doesn't it? How deeply embedded this performance of extroversion is today.
Well,
that intense focus on radiating energy, the aggressive upselling, constantly needing to know how to sell yourself. It feels like the modern peak of that forceful personality ideal that Carnegie was promoting a century ago.
it really does. The source's description of the author being told to work on her tendency to tell, not sell her ideas, and getting this detailed feedback on her people skills, it just shows how central that metric has become in professional development in so many fields.
It's all about generating that eager want in other people, just like Carnegie taught. The pressure to perform extroversion is immense.
It is. But the source material doesn't just leave it at culture. It digs into the possibility that these differences aren't purely learned or cultural, that there might be biological roots.
Right, the nature side of the nature-nurture debate. This is fascinating.
Yeah, the material explores research, suggesting that a really key difference between introverts and extroverts might be their optimal level of external stimulation, how much stuff happening around them feels right.
Okay, explain that.
So the idea is that introverts tend to function best, feel most comfortable when there's less stimulation. Think a quiet environment, focusing deeply on one thing, maybe a conversation with just one or two people. Extroverts, on the other hand, seem to thrive on more stimulation. They seek out large groups, loud music, novelty, excitement. They get energized by it.
So it's not necessarily that introverts dislike people.
Not at all.
It's that social interaction, especially with lots of people, is inherently very stimulating. There's a great quote in there from David Winter. Other people are very arousing. 100 people are very stimulating compared to 100 books or 100 grains of sand.
That nails it. Your nervous system is essentially calibrated differently. And the source highlights the really groundbreaking work of Jerome Kagan, a developmental psychologist. He did these long-term studies, tracking kids from when they were babies over many, many years.
And what did Kagan find?
He identified this temperamental difference really early on. He called them high reactive infants versus low reactive infants.
High reactive.
Yeah. These are the babies who showed much more intense physical and emotional responses to new or unfamiliar stimuli, like a colorful mobile suddenly appearing or hearing a stranger's voice. They'd cry more, thrash their arms and legs more vigorously.
Okay.
And when Kagan followed these kids up over the years, he found that a significant number of those high reactive infants grew up to be more cautious as children, more thoughtful, sometimes more reserved or shy as teenagers and adults.
And the low reactive babies.
They were the ones who stayed pretty calm and unbothered by the new stimuli, and they were more likely to develop into the more bold, sociable, risk-taking types later on.
Interesting. And Kagan wasn't just observing behavior, right? He used objective measures.
Exactly. Things like heart rate, blood pressure, even how much their pupils dilated in response to stimuli. This pointed towards specific biological mechanisms at play.
And a key part of the brain involved here seems to be the amygdala.
Yes, the amygdala. It's crucial for processing emotions, especially fear, and it's like our brain's novelty detector, scanning for potential threats.
Okay.
In these high-reactive individuals, the amygdala seems to be more sensitive. It gets triggered more easily by new situations, unfamiliar faces, potential challenges.
And this sensitivity doesn't just disappear as you get older, even if you learn to cope.
Apparently not entirely. The source talks about fMRI studies by Dr. Carl Schwartz. He looked at adults who had been identified as high-reactive infants decades earlier. Even if they had become socially skilled adults, their amygdala still showed a stronger response when they looked at pictures of unfamiliar faces compared to those who were low-reactive infants.
Wow. So the underlying wiring is still there.
It seems so. As the author puts it, you might learn strategies to talk yourself down from the ledge. And social situations, you learn coping mechanisms, but that basic biological tendency, that sensitivity, it's still present.
That's a really crucial point. It's not about fundamentally changing who you are, but about finding ways to function effectively in the world, given your natural wiring.
Exactly. And the source also brings in Jay Belsky's idea of orchid children versus dandelion children.
Orchid and dandelion. Okay.
So high-reactive children are like orchids. They're highly sensitive to their environment, delicate. They can be more vulnerable to stress, to negative experiences. They might wilt in harsh conditions.
Okay, that makes sense.
But and this is the really important part, these orchid children also benefit massively more than other kids from a nurturing, supportive, positive environment. They don't just survive in good conditions. They can truly thrive, blossom spectacularly.
And the dandelions?
Dandelion children are hardier, less sensitive. They can kind of thrive almost anywhere, like dandelions pushing through concrete. But they don't get that same huge boost from an optimal environment that the orchids do.
So that biological sensitivity, it's not just a weakness or a vulnerability, it's also a potential for exceptional growth in the right setting. That completely reframes it.
It really does. The source also touches on neurotransmitters, especially dopamine.
Ah, the reward chemical.
Right. Research suggests that extroverts might have more active dopamine pathways. Dopamine is linked to reward, motivation, the pleasure we get from pursuing and achieving goals, from novelty. So this heightened sensitivity to dopamine could explain why extroverts often seem more drawn to external rewards, things like social status, money, promotions, thrilling experiences. They literally get a bigger buzz from chasing and getting those things.
And introverts, then, maybe a less intense response in that reward system.
That's the idea. They aren't as powerfully pulled by those external reward signals. Daniel Nettle is quoted suggesting introverts have a smaller response to reward cues, so they go less out of their way to pursue them. They're not as driven to break a leg to get there, as he puts it.
Okay, that difference in motivation by external rewards, that could have some really big implications, couldn't it? Especially in certain environments.
Huge implications. And the source uses the 2008 financial crisis as a kind of case study.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, that crisis was fueled, at least in part, by massive, unchecked, risk-taking overconfidence, a kind of collective blindness to really obvious dangers. You could argue it was driven by this relentless pursuit of short-term financial reward that dopamine hit.
Right.
And the source asks, what role did personality types play in all that?
The example it gives of Vince Kaminsky at Enron is, well, it's chilling.
It really is.
Yeah.
He was the head of risk management there, described as cautious, analytical, an introvert. He clearly saw the huge systemic problems, the crazy risks the company was taking with those complex financial instruments.
But he wasn't heard.
He tried to warn them. But the culture at Enron was all about these aggressive, super confident, risk-loving cowboys, as they were called. Kaminsky was apparently dismissed by the company president, Jeff Skilling, who basically said, "We don't need cops, Vince." His warnings were ignored, not because they were wrong, but arguably because he had the wrong personality style for that hyper-extroverted, risk-hungry culture. Too cautious, too quiet.
Wow. Being right wasn't enough.
And the source suggests this wasn't just Enron. During the run-up to the 2008 crisis, individuals who had that temperament for caution, for deep analysis, they were often drowned out or pushed aside by the dominant culture of confident, fast-paced decision-making. The book contrasts this with famously successful long-term investors like Seth Klarman or Warren Buffett.
Right, Buffett comes up.
Yeah, they're described as being known for their extreme caution, their deep aversion to speculation and hype. They famously take huge amounts of time to just read, analyze data, reflect quietly, think deeply before they make any big moves.
Buffett's speech in 1999 warning about the tech bubble being irrational. That's highlighted, isn't it?
It is, and it wasn't some off-the-cuff charismatic performance. It was a meticulously prepared speech. He'd spent weeks in solitary reflection and analysis. It's presented as a classic example of a more cautious, introverted approach, yielding incredibly valuable, though initially unpopular wisdom.
So while the extrovert ideal often pushes for speed, confidence, quick decisions, there's enormous value, especially when things are complex and uncertain, in that more cautious, reflective, analytical style often associated with introverts.
Absolutely. The financial world, which often rewards speed and aggression, paid a massive price for undervaluing caution back then.
Okay, so the source material then takes this idea and expands it out into other areas, right? Like creativity and how we work today. It challenges something the book calls the new groupthink.
Yes, the new groupthink. This is the now pervasive belief that creativity and innovation have to come from constant collaboration. Group brainstorming sessions, teamwork, endless interaction.
That sounds very familiar.
It is, and this belief has led to things like open office plans becoming almost standard, mandatory team-based work. The book mentions that by the year 2000, half of all U.S. organizations use teams. Now, it's pretty much all major companies. Open offices are everywhere.
But the source argues this might actually be counterproductive, especially for deep thinking and creativity.
Exactly. It presents some pretty compelling evidence suggesting this approach might actually hinder creativity, not help it, especially for certain personality types. It brings in figures like Albert Einstein, who apparently said something like, "For well I know that in order to attain any definite goal, it is imperative that one person do the thinking and the commanding."
One person doing the thinking. Interesting.
And studies on highly creative people, like those by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, often find a pattern. Many exceptionally creative individuals spent a lot of time kind of on the social margins when they were younger. They needed solitude to really develop their unique skills and talents.
Like Steve Wozniak at Apple.
Perfect example. The engineering genius behind Apple. He preferred working alone in his cubicle. Or think of Charles Darwin, retreating to his study for intense focus. Solitude seems crucial.
And the evidence against group brainstorming specifically seems quite strong in the source material.
It really is.
Yeah.
It cites this classic 1963 study by Marvin Dunnett at 3M. He compared individuals brainstorming ideas alone versus brainstorming in groups. The results were really clear, and they've been replicated many times since.
And the result was?
Individuals working alone consistently generated more ideas and critically better quality ideas than the groups did.
More and better ideas alone. Why is that?
Well, the source explores a few reasons. One is called production blocking. In a group, only one person can talk at a time, right? So while one person is talking, everyone else's ideas might just fade away or they hold back.
Right.
Another is evaluation apprehension. That's the fear of looking stupid in front of your colleagues. So people censor themselves. They don't share their more half-baked or unconventional ideas, which might actually be the seeds of something brilliant.
Makes sense. And then there's just the sheer distraction factor in modern workplaces.
Oh, absolutely, especially open offices. The source mentions a company called Backbone Entertainment. They found their game developers, many of whom were introverts, were actively seeking out quiet corners, cubicles, empty offices, even little nooks and crannies, just to escape the constant noise and interruption. They needed that quiet focus to do complex coding and design work.
Distraction really is the enemy of that kind of deep work, isn't it?
It is. As the source points out, what often looks like efficient multitasking is usually just rapid task switching. And that's significantly less productive and more prone to errors. The natural inclination of many introverts towards single tasking, towards sustained focus, seems much better suited for truly deep, creative problem solving.
So the takeaway isn't that collaboration is bad.
No, not at all. Collaboration is important for building relationships, for executing plans once ideas are formed.
Right, but the source makes a really strong case that we need to value solitude and focused individual work much more, especially for generating original ideas and tackling complex problems. Maybe the pendulum has swung too far towards constant group interaction.
I think that's exactly the argument. The source also looks at how these personality differences affect social dynamics more broadly. Things like conformity, for instance.
Ah, the Ash conformity experiments come up, right? The ones with the lines of different lengths?
Yes, those classic experiments where people were put in a group and pressured to agree with an obviously wrong answer about which line matched a standard line. It's a powerful demonstration of how strong the desire to just fit in can be.
Even when you know the group is wrong.
Even then. And then Greg Burns did an fMRI study that added a fascinating layer. He found that when people chose to go along with the group's wrong answer, the main activity wasn't in the prefrontal cortex, the part associated with conscious decision-making.
Where was it?
It was more in the areas linked to visual perception itself, which suggests the social pressure might have been so intense it actually felt like it altered how they were seeing the lines. Like they started to perceive reality differently to match the group.
Wow, that's kind of disturbing.
It is. And even more telling was what happened neurologically when people chose to resist the group pressure and give the correct answer. When they decided to dissent.
What happened then?
Their amygdala lit up. That brain region involved in fear and threat detection, Burns called it the pain of independence.
The pain of independence.
Yeah, it shows just how deeply uncomfortable, even physically stressful, and fear-inducing it can be to stand alone against the crowd, which obviously has huge implications for group decision-making. Think about juries, committees, even just team meetings at work.
Mm-hmm.
How likely are people to voice dissenting opinions if it feels literally painful or threatening?
Yeah, that's a powerful finding. The source also gets into how introversion and extroversion play out in our close relationships, doesn't it? Using examples like Emily and Greg.
Right. Emily and Greg are presented as a classic introvert-extrovert couple dynamic during conflict. Emily, the introvert, tends to withdraw, shut down, become quiet when they argue. She needs time alone to process her thoughts and feelings internally. Greg, the extrovert, does the opposite. He becomes louder, more animated. He needs to talk things through right then and there, externally, to understand what's happening and feel connected.
And both feel like their way is the right way to handle it.
Exactly. But their fundamental styles clash. It leads to this frustrating cycle where Emily feels attacked and overwhelmed by Greg's intensity, so she withdraws more. And Greg feels stonewalled and unheard because Emily's quiet, so he pushes harder. It's a destructive loop born from misunderstanding their different needs and styles.
That perfectly illustrates how different ways of communicating, rooted in temperament, can be so easily misinterpreted.
It does. And interestingly, the material notes that introverts might actually be better at picking up on subtle social cues when they're not under pressure to perform or respond instantly. They can be really keen observers and listeners in calmer settings.
So the book offers some ways to bridge these gaps in relationships.
Yeah, it emphasizes things like empathy, trying to understand the underlying need behind the other person's communication style rather than just reacting to the style itself. The example of John and Jennifer learning to navigate their differences is shown as a more positive path.
And it also touches on parenting, right? Especially the challenge if you're, say, an extroverted parent with a more introverted or shy child.
Yes, the example of Sarah and her daughter Ava is used. Sarah, being outgoing herself, feels anxious about Ava's quietness, worries she won't be popular. This leads her to inadvertently pressure Ava or label her in ways that aren't helpful.
Like calling her shy.
Exactly. The book strongly advises against labeling kids as shy, because shy can feel like a fixed trait, like, I am shy. It's better to talk about feelings or preferences. I feel shy sometimes, or I prefer quieter games. It makes it seem less like an unchangeable part of their identity.
So what should parents do instead?
The material suggests being a calm role model yourself, gently exposing kids to new social situations in small, manageable doses, teaching them little self-coaxing skills to manage their own anxiety, and really celebrating small acts of bravery, small steps outside their comfort zone.
So it's about understanding and respecting their temperament, but also gently encouraging them to stretch themselves in healthy ways, like helping a kid get used to the ocean, starting in the shallow water.
Precisely. And then the source broadens the lens even further, looking at culture, which is fascinating. It mentions things like Robert McCrae's personality map, which shows broad tendencies for East Asian cultures to score as more introverted on average compared to European and American cultures, which tend to score more extroverted.
Really, cultural averages.
Yeah. And studies comparing, say, Chinese and Canadian children found some striking differences. In Canada, shy kids were often less popular, sometimes even shunned by peers. But in China, shyness wasn't necessarily viewed negatively. In fact, quiet, thoughtful children were sometimes preferred for leadership roles because qualities like humility, reflection, and careful listening are highly valued in that cultural context.
That's a complete flip from the Western ideal of the assertive leader.
It really is. It stands in stark contrast to that Western premium placed on being cheerful, enthusiastic, and sociable. The source even mentions a brain imaging study where American brains showed positive responses to images linked with dominance, while Japanese brains showed positive responses to images linked with submissiveness, reflecting different cultural values around individuality versus group harmony.
Wow. So this cultural comparison is really important then.
Absolutely critical, because it demonstrates that our Western extrovert ideal isn't some universal human truth. It's culturally specific. It emerged relatively recently in history. Different societies have valued different traits at different times.
Which really underscores the point that valuing introversion isn't just about being nice to quiet people. It's recognizing a valid, powerful way of being that other cultures have esteemed.
Exactly. And the experience of Asian Americans, like the example of Mike Way in the source, really highlights the personal cost of this cultural clash. Feeling this double consciousness, pressured to adopt an outgoing, assertive persona in American settings that feels really unnatural, while your own cultural background values a quieter, more reflective approach.
This sounds exhausting.
It does.
Yeah.
Which leads us nicely into another really important concept from the source, free trait theory. This is mostly associated with Professor Brian Little.
Okay, free trait theory. What's the core idea?
The core idea is that, yes, we have these innate biological temperaments, our default settings, if you like,
Yeah.
but we are not slaves to them. We have the capacity to act outside of our natural tendencies, especially when it involves what Little calls our core personal projects.
Core personal projects, what are those?
According to Little, these are the things in our lives that we consider deeply important, meaningful, and worthwhile. Things we're invested in. They should feel manageable, and ideally, they're supported by people we care about. When something rises to the level of a core personal project, we become much more capable of acting out of character to pursue it.
Can you give an example?
Well, the classic example is Brian Little himself.
Yeah.
He identifies as a strong introvert. But when he gives lectures, he becomes this incredibly engaging, animated, seemingly extroverted performer. Why? Because teaching his students, connecting with them deeply about ideas he loves, that's a core personal project for him.
So the importance of the goal overrides the natural inclination.
Exactly. Or think of an introvert who throws a huge, elaborate surprise party for their extroverted partner. They might find the process draining, but their partner's happiness is the core project, so they push through.
So we can stretch ourselves, we can perform behaviors that don't feel natural, but the source also warns this isn't free, right? There's a cost. It mentions behavioral leakage.
Right. Behavioral leakage. While we can put on a convincing performance act extroverted when we're introverted, or vice versa, especially if the motivation is high, our true selves can kind of subtly leak through.
How so?
In little things. Unconscious body language, fleeting facial expressions, maybe the tone of voice isn't quite right. We can play the part, but it takes effort. It's not effortless.
And that effort, it's draining.
Yes, that's the key. Acting out of character, especially for a long time, uses up energy. It depletes us. And that's where the idea of restorative niches becomes absolutely vital.
Restorative niches. Okay, so these are ways to recharge after acting out of character.
Precisely. They're the spaces, the activities, the times that you deliberately seek out to return to your true self, to recover that spent energy, to feel like yourself again after you've been stretching.
So what does a restorative niche look like?
It can be anything, really. It could be a physical place, like finding a quiet office to work in if such a thing exists anymore, or a specific corner in a coffee shop, going for a walk in nature, or simply retreating to your own home after a very stimulating day.
Okay.
But it can also be about time. Scheduling quiet breaks between demanding meetings, taking a lunch break alone instead of socializing, maybe even saying no to a social event before a big presentation to conserve your energy.
It's about managing your energy based on your temperament.
Exactly. The source gives this great example of Robert Rubin, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary. Apparently an introvert, he needed quiet time to process even during intense Oval Office meetings. So what did he do? He reportedly made a habit of choosing a chair slightly apart from the main cluster, just creating a small physical buffer, a subtle restorative niche for himself right there in the room.
That's clever. It's about conscious self-management, really.
It is. Whether you lean introverted and need that downtime to recharge after stimulation, or you lean extroverted and actually need social interaction or activity to feel energized, recognizing your needs and intentionally building these niches into your life is crucial. It prevents burnout, it allows you to maintain well-being, and it actually enables you to stretch when you need to for those core projects.
Because you know you can recover afterwards.
Exactly. The source also briefly touches on the downside of suppressing your natural self too much, Like Judith Grob's study on hiding negative emotions. It showed it could actually impair memory and lead people to feel more negative overall. It's another reason to work with your temperament, not constantly fight against it.
Which really brings us back full circle to the importance of self-awareness, doesn't it? That theme runs through everything we've discussed from the source material.
It really does.
Understanding where you fall on that introversion-extroversion spectrum, it's not just about finding a label. It's a really practical tool for navigating the world more effectively and, frankly, taking better care of yourself.
Exactly. I mean, this deep dive has really shown that personality is this incredibly rich tapestry, right? It's woven from our biology, our cultural environment, our personal experiences. And introversion isn't some kind of deficit that needs fixing. It's a distinct, powerful way of being.
Yeah.
And it brings with it this unique set of strengths that are just invaluable in so many areas of life.
Absolutely. We've talked about the caution and the deep analytical skills that can prevent disasters. We've talked about the solitary focus that's often necessary for true creativity and innovation.
And the empathetic listening.
Yeah.
The thoughtful processing that can make relationships richer. And let's not forget the quiet courage like Rosa Parks, demonstrated by transformative figures throughout history. The contributions are profound.
They really are. And the extrovert ideal, while it might feel dominant right now in our culture, it's useful to remember it's relatively recent, historically speaking, and it's definitely not universal.
Recognizing that cultural bias is liberating, isn't it? It lets us question the assumptions. It lets us consciously decide to value the strengths that don't necessarily involve shouting the loudest or being the center of attention.
And understanding free trait theory is also empowering. It tells us we're not just stuck. We have agency. We can act outside our comfort zone for the things that really matter to us, those core personal projects.
But it also reminds us that it takes effort, and that being proactive about creating those restorative niches, those recovery times, is absolutely vital for our long-term well-being and sustainability.
So whether you see yourself strongly at one end of the spectrum or maybe somewhere more in the middle, the real value here, drawing from the source material, seems to be encouraging you, the listener, to just pause, reflect on your own nature, identify your unique strengths, and think about how you navigate a world that often seems set up for a particular type.
Yeah, how can you take these ideas and actually use them? Maybe it's about seeing and valuing the quieter strengths in your colleagues, your team members. Maybe it's about understanding the dynamics in your own family better.
Or maybe, most importantly, it's about giving yourself permission. Permission to seek out or even actively create the environments where you genuinely thrive, where your particular way of being isn't just tolerated but can actually flourish, instead of feeling like you always have to contort yourself into a shape that doesn't quite fit.
It's really about building a life that honors your temperament. One that lets you leverage your natural strengths while also giving you the energy and the strategy to stretch yourself when you choose to for the goals that truly matter to you.
So let's leave you with a final provocative thought, something to maybe mull over after this deep dive. It builds on everything we've discussed from the source. Given the clear value of these often introverted traits like caution, deep processing, resistance to groupthink, careful observation, empathy, qualities that seem increasingly necessary, frankly, for dealing with the complexity and uncertainty of our modern world, whether it's global finance or climate change or just complex problem solving in general. How might we as individuals, in our organizations as a society, become more intentional about identifying, cultivating, and genuinely empowering these quieter strengths? What valuable perspectives, what potential innovations, what crucial safeguards might we be missing out on or even actively suppressing when we consistently prioritize speed, assertiveness, and gregariousness over reflection, careful analysis, and deep consideration?
And maybe on a more personal letter for you listening, this source material makes it really clear how different environments, cultures, workplaces, even our homes, can favor different traits. So how can you, maybe starting today, intentionally create or seek out the specific environments, the relationships, the structures in your own life that will best allow your unique strengths, whatever they happen to be, to not just get by, but to truly flourish?
Thanks for tuning in to the Book Summary Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe for more summaries, and share it with someone who's ready to grow. Want deeper insights, exclusive book notes, and reading tips? Join our free newsletter. The link's in the description. And don't forget, if you'd like to read the full book, our affiliate link is right below. It helps support the channel and keeps the summaries coming. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing.